In 1961, the United Kingdom granted formal independence to the Protectorate of Kuwait, which then became the Emirates of Kuwait. This small but oil-rich nation had long been coveted by Iraq, its much larger northern neighbor. In 1958, its monarchy was overthrown by the Ba'athist Republic. Iraq never recognized Kuwait, and on several occasions in the following 30 years, laid claim to all or part of it. Apart from its large oil reserves, Iraq wanted Kuwait for its comparatively extensive coast along the western side of the Persian Gulf, as Iraq only had a very short coast within military reach of Iran. Iraq forces moved into Kuwait on August 2, 1990. You can find more detailed information about the Iraq invasion of Kuwait in the video linked in the description and the card up here. On August 6, King Fahd of Saudi Arabia asked for a foreign military aid to defend his kingdom against the possibility of further Iraqi aggression. In the United States, President George Bush ordered immediate planning for Operation Desert Shield, which would mean the rapid dispatch of large American force to the region, starting with the air transport to Saudi Arabia. On August 7th, some 48 F-15 Eagles fly non-stop from Langley Air Base, Virginia to Dhahran in Saudi Arabia, lasting between 14 to 17 hours and including 6 or 7 in-flight refuelings. On August 8, the Iraqi government annexes Kuwait as Iraq's 19th province. On January 15, 1991, the deadline imposed by the United Nations for Iraq to have completed the evacuation of her forces from Kuwait expired. The forces of the coalition didn't respond immediately, but preparations were almost complete for offensive action, in which a major air campaign would be waged to disable the Iraqi forces and Iraq's command, communications, transport and industrial capabilities. Only after this had been achieved would ground forces be committed in what it was hoped would be a short campaign to complete the crushing of Iraqi forces and thus free Kuwait. At 2:38 a.m. Baghdad time, Task Force Normandy destroyed Iraqi radar sites near the Iraqi-Saudi Arabian border, which could have been warned Iraq of an upcoming attack. At 2:43 a.m., US Air Force made assaults on airfields in western Iraq. Minutes later, one of the US Air Force aircrafts destroyed an Iraqi de-assault Mirage F-1. At 3 a.m. on January 17, the air offensive may be said to have got fully underway, with the F-117 dropped a single 907 kg laser-guided bomb, which struck its target, the communication building in Baghdad. Government buildings, TV stations, airfields, presidential palaces, military installations, communication lines, supply bases, oil refineries, the Baghdad airport, electric power plants and factories making the Iraqi military equipment were the first targets of coalition airstrikes. 5 hours after the first attacks, Iraq's state radio broadcast a voice identified as Saddam Hussein declaring that the Great Duel, the mother of all battles, has begun. At the time of the Gulf War, the Iraqi Air Force was the 6th largest in the world, consisting of over 750 fixed-wing combat aircraft. On the eve of Operation Desert Storm, the coalition of the Gulf War numbered 2,430 fixed-wing aircraft in the Kuwaiti Theater of the Operation. The United States Navy also made its strength tell, the aircraft of each aircraft carrier contributing some 150 sorties per day when they were within range of worthwhile targets. The coalition air forces dropped some 18,000 tons of bombs in the first 5 hours of their offensive, and in the course of operations, some 655 coalition aircraft completed 1,332 sorties against communication centers in 95 airfields. The Iraqis said that they had brought down 60 aircraft, but in fact only 3 coalition aircraft failed to return safely. On the first night of the war, 2 FA-18s from the USS Carrier were flying outside of the Baghdad when 2 Iraqi MiG-25s engaged them. An Iraqi MiG-25 piloted by Zuhair Dawood fired a missile, shooting down an American FA-18 and killing its pilot, Lieutenant Commander Scott Spiker. The first 2 days of the campaign were waged by aircraft operating from below Iraq's southern border, but in January 19th another front became active as aircraft based in Incirlik in south-central Turkey entered the fray. Iraq, in an effort to demonstrate their own air offensive capability, on January 24th, the Iraqis attempt to mount a strike against the major Saudi oil refinery, Ras Tanura. Two Mirage F-1 fighters and two MiG-23s took off from bases in Iraq. They were spotted by US AWACS and two Royal Saudi Air Force F-15s were sent to intercept. When the Saudis appeared, the Iraqi MiGs turned tail, but the Mirages pressed on. Captain Iyad al-Sharmani, one of the Saudi pilots, maneuvered his jets behind the Mirages and shot down both aircraft. A few days later, the Iraqis made their last true air offensive of the war, unsuccessfully attempting to shoot down F-15s patrolling the Iranian border. After this episode, the Iraqis made no more air efforts of their own, sending most of their jets to Iran in hopes that they might someday get their air force back. From the last days of January, the coalition air forces began a major effort to ensure the total isolation of southern Iraq and Kuwait from the rest of Iraq. This effort concentrated on the destruction of the bridges needed for any significant southward movement of men and, more importantly, armor and artillery. By January 30th, the coalition air forces had hit 33 of the 36 strategic bridges over the Tigris and Euphrates. The land campaign was scheduled to start on February 24th, and by the day before, the coalition air forces had claimed the destruction of 1,685 tanks, 925 armored personnel carriers, and 1,485 pieces of artillery. The coalition ground forces started their advance at 4:30 a.m. on February 24th under the cover of concentrated air power provided by the coalition air force. Iraqi defenses was based largely on the belief that the coalition primary effort would be made by ground and amphibious forces in and around Kuwait, but in fact the main weight of the coalition offensive had shifted to the west. Saddam Hussein proclaimed publicly that his forces had won a great victory, but privately ordered all surviving forces to fall back. The land campaign lasted just 100 hours, and in this time the Iraqi army lost about half of the 42 divisions it had deployed to the theater. The garrison to Kuwait vehicles laden with booty, but the coalition air forces made their way northward a misery of burned out vehicles and killed men. After private and public expression of concern about the loss of Iraqi life, especially after reports of total destruction on a 4.8-kilometer stretch of the main route north from Kuwait known as Dead Highway, President Bush decided to cut short the offensive. The air campaign devastated entire Iraqi brigades deployed in the open desert in combat formation. It also prevented an effective Iraqi resupply of units engaged in combat, and prevented some 450,000 Iraqi troops from achieving a larger force concentration. The air campaign had a significant effect on the tactics employed by opposing forces in subsequent conflicts. Entire Iraqi divisions were dug in the open while facing United States forces. They were not dispersed as with the Yugoslav forces in Kosovo. The coalition forces ended their offensive on February 28. By this time, the Iraqis had left Kuwait, whose liberation had been the primary objective of the war. The Iraqi army had suffered an unknown but very large number of casualties, as well as the destruction of 3,700 tanks and the capture of 175,000 men. On the other side, the coalition forces had suffered the loss of only 150 personnel killed while completing a total rout of their opponent. There can be no doubt that the small scale of the coalition losses and totally comprehensive success of their ground offensive were the direct results of the coalition's overwhelming air campaign of more than 100,000 sorties. You can visit our channel for more videos about Iraq. Write your opinions in the comments below for more videos and maybe your suggestions for our future videos. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.